1920s was a time of great change and evolution in American society. Throughout this time, there was a discourse between earlier ideas and a tradition to the new ways of living. The struggle and frustration that certain groups felt at the turn of the century caused an explosion of new ideas/ways of life, such as women being devoid of rights, causing them to act more freely, which is shown in the popularization of flappers. People wanted to stay up to date with modern times, which caused them to adapt to technology because of the rapid urbanization and population growth, and people of color who were frustrated from slavery and discrimination beginning to build their own culture and pride when given the opportunity.
The struggle between traditional and modern views is evident regarding women's rights and roles in society. Before the 1920s, women were seen primarily as housewives, limited to domestic roles such as caring for children and maintaining the household, as reflected in the Gibson girl stereotype. They were not able to vote or work the same jobs as men. Women also dressed modestly, showing little to no skin, and acted reserved. This is what life was like for most women in America before the change that was brought about in the 1920s. An image taken in 1921 by an unknown photographer represents this type of woman. In contrast, life began to change in the 1920s when the 19th Amendment passed, giving women the right to vote. Women began to be able to work more substantive jobs, but this was a difficult and lengthy process, as shown in this political cartoon by Elmer Andrews Bushnell. It depicts a woman dressed traditionally, carrying a heavy load of water on her shoulders and standing against a ladder labeled with words such as teacher, shop worker, and finally near the top, equal suffrage. It symbolizes the difficulty women had in gaining their new equal rights. With newfound freedoms, women who were originally housewives now started embracing the flapper lifestyle, where they started wearing more revealing clothing, partying, and defying traditional norms. Although these changes were made, there were still people who believed that women shouldn't have these rights. Many traditionalists believed that women liberation would threaten the family structure, which they saw as the foundation of a stable society. Others worried that women entering the workforce would take jobs away from men or lower the wages, which would create economic instability. Traditionalists also feared a loss of moral values, associating the flapper lifestyle with complete immorality and social decline. Also, religious and cultural norms emphasized the distinct roles for men and women, which went against these new ideas and changes about women. Women now had jobs and participated in politics, which were against the previous lifestyle.
The struggle between traditional and modern views is evident in the technological innovation of the 1920s. Some of the exciting new technologies that were becoming invented and popularized include the car. A 1923 photograph of a car illustrates how modernist ideals embrace technological progress. Although these new technologies were controversial to some, they were still very popular and widely accepted in American culture and society, even though the car had opposed the traditional view of transportation, which includes the usage of horses and horse-drawn carriages. Some of the reason for this was through the use of advertisement. The medicinal advertisement shows persuasive methods that incorporate pressuring the consumer into believing that the product being advertised is the best product and that the consumer will be alienated if they do not purchase the product. These tactics were also used to promote and sell new technologies, making the consumer believe that it was essential to own them. While many Americans eagerly welcomed these advancements, traditionalists resisted, fearing that technologies like the car disrupted established ways of life, such as community-focused rural lifestyles to more fast-paced modern kind of living. Traditionalists saw consumer culture as promoting materialism and instant gratification, which went against their old values of hard work, frugality, and self-reliance. They viewed advertising strategies as manipulative and morally corrupt because of the way it made you feel if you did not have the product it was promoting. They saw these new technologies as going against their long-held traditions, which led to the cultural tensions.
Finally, the struggle between traditionalists and modern values was evident in the Harlem Renaissance. It was driven by the Great Migration, as African Americans moved from the rural South to the urban centers like Harlem for better opportunities and a new way of life. This movement included African Americans creating their own pride and identity through music, art, and social expression. One of the African American people who lived during this time, Ossie Davis, had said this in the Century video.
If I had to choose between heaven and Harlem, Harlem, of course, would win.
One of the most prominent things to come out of the Harlem Renaissance was jazz music. One of the pioneers of this genre is Louis Armstrong. This song by Armstrong titled Chimes Blues was extremely popular and influential, and represents the creation of culture and newfound pride that came to African Americans from this movement. Being able to have music was a massive step forward for African American culture that eventually spread throughout the United States. Along with music, new art came in many other forms in the Harlem Renaissance. Much of the art that came from this movement were paintings. The liberation of black people was seen through this. The painting titled Looking Upward by James Lyness Wells was a very famous painting to come out of this period. The silhouetted figure of an African American making his way through an urban city shows how African Americans look past their traditionally oppressed ways and look towards the future to see what good things were to come for them. However, as seen before, traditionalists resisted the movement, seeing it as a threat to the racial and social status of black people. This backlash was rooted in systemic racism and anxiety over the cultural shifts of the time. They viewed jazz as morally corrupting and irritating as it promoted the social change and challenged the deeply held benefits that were built up from years of slavery and oppression. Traditionalists feared it would disrupt the racial hierarchies and cultural norms.
The struggle between the modern and traditional views on women gaining rights, the new uprise of technology, and the liberation of African American culture caused all of these specific subjects to bloom into massively large movements. The disparity between modernist and traditionalist ideas fueled tensions that wound up propelling these movements into much larger trends. This disparity between traditional and modern views is still seen today in things such as the Roe v. Wade case. Traditionally, abortion was seen as a crime and went against many religious views. According to the Pew Research Center, they say that sizable religious groups in opposition to abortion, with few or no exceptions, include the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the Assemblies of God, the largest U.S. Pentecostal denomination. This directly opposes the modern view that abortion is necessary for gender equality and is a basic human right for women. This disparity causes many riots and rallies to form, creating a large debate and movement for both sides. The National Women's Law Center states, the ability to decide whether and when to become pregnant and parent is crucial to determining one's own life's path. These disparities between modern and traditional views are seen throughout history and especially so in the trends of the 1920s.